The story of Khidr comes from the east, and it's very ancient. And in the east, the climate is dry most of the year, and it's very hot. And when rain comes down, it's considered to be a sign of grace, a sign of God's mercy. It's also a sign of Khidr. He is, among other things, the carrier of God's mercy and compassion. And he is known by many names, and one of them is the name which in Arabic can mean also rain, grace, and redeemer. So when it rained this morning, it was a sign of grace. So I hope that what I put together would be accepted with grace. The story of Khidr is the story of a meeting. It's the meeting between the two planes of existence in which we live out our mystical quest. It is the story of how this meeting becomes at all possible, how it can become truly real, how it can become realized in the midst of our earthly life. Khidr, whose name is usually translated as the green man, stands always at this meeting point where the two seas meet, where the sea of life meets the sea of death, where the space-bound meets the spaceless, where the time-bound meets the timeless. And although he comes to us through myths and legends as a mythical figure, as an archetypal image, rather than as a concrete historical person, he nevertheless has to be realized in our lives concretely, in order for us to be able to navigate between these two planes of existence freely, with little fear and with no exaggerated resistance. Khidr, by whichever form he chooses to reveal himself, makes this passage between the two worlds possible for us. But first we have to seek him out. We have to recognize him and the meaning that he carries with him. I have written the first version of this talk in London on a bleak January morning. There was not much movement in the air when I was writing it. I was looking through the window, and a lifeless scene lay in front of my eyes. Red, uniform roof tiles, wet and immobile. Blind, sealed window panes, behind opaque curtains which disclosed nothing. Inanimate, out-of-place TV aerials stuck out aimlessly towards a metallic, hostile-looking sky. Naked trees spread their crooked wooden arms and their spiky fingers ominously. Birds seem to have forsaken this place, have migrated to warmer, more hospitable regions. Only the cries of ravens and the shrieks of a few seagulls pierced the immobile silence now and then. Not a leaf to be seen on the January morning, not much green anywhere. A gloomy, wintry, suburban landscape. A world which has grown old and tired. Olam Epir, an old world, in the words of Hafiz, the Persian poet. The world has grown old, he says. writing in Shiraz in the 14th century. And yet, very soon, so he promises, and his words have been taken as oracles for all these centuries by lovers of Sufi poetry. Very soon, only a pace away, a turning point, an imminent transformation which will turn the world upside down. Spring will burst forth, and everything will become alive and verdant. Here are Hafiz's words. The breath of the morning wind will soon spread the fragrance of musk, and the world will soon become young again. The narcissus will soon wink at the anemones, and scarlet lilacs to white lilies a fragrant cup will soon display. The nightingale who had endured so long the pain of separation will soon burst into the rose's chamber in joyous noise and clamorous array. Oh, friends, if I leave the mosque and go to the tavern, don't fuss, for the preaching has taken too long, and the time will soon give way. O heart, what will warrant the wealth of persistence if you cast for tomorrow the joys of today? The rose is precious. Enjoy her company now, for into the garden she came this way, and soon she will go that way. It is for your sake that Hafiz has come to the plane of existence. With a firm foot, bid him farewell, because soon he too will be passing away. What Hafiz has captured in these verses is the meeting point between the dying old world and the young new world which is bursting forth. There is always a meeting point, an overlap between this way and that way, between what was and what is soon going to be. This meeting point, this point of transition, is the realm of Khidr, the green one, the hidden one, the remover of obstacles, the timeless pole. Preparing now the second version in this talk, Hafiz's wisdom comes to life for me. It is mid-April. I'm not in London, but in the west coast of America. Everything around me is lush and bursting with life. Even Hafiz's poetry is no match for the living, vivid experience of Chimney Rock. And walking there the other day with Nan, I experienced the deep joy, colorfulness, versatility, and sacredness of nature in its most ravishing appearance. Yet I have also experienced the transient nature of everything around me, including myself, the brief moment in which this experience could be captured in time. The rose is precious. Enjoy her company now, for into the garden she came this way, and soon she will go that way. The experience of the now, which is so fundamental to Sufi teaching, and which is so different from everything to which we have become accustomed and conditioned. This too, this experience of now, belongs to the realm of Khidr. Although the name Khidr is in Arabic and comes to us directly from Muslim sources, Khidr is in fact as ancient as the oldest preserved story of the human race, the story of Gilgamesh. When Gilgamesh, the great hero of ancient Mesopotamia, discovered that every living thing must die, he resolved to seek out the wise old men of his time, Utnapishtim, who lived at the mouth of the rivers, on an island across the sea of death, in order to learn from him the secret of immortality. And in a similar way, although with different names, a famous yet enigmatic Quranic passage tells us how Moses, the great prophet and lawgiver of the children of Israel, how Moses sets out to search for the source of divine knowledge. Moses pledges to search for a certain mysterious, unnamed man upon whom God had bestowed this divine knowledge, which is far superior to the knowledge and wisdom given to Moses. Like Utnapishtim in the Gilgamesh epic, this unnamed man, whom the Quran describes simply as one of our servants and to whom we had given mercy from us, and whom we had taught knowledge proceeding from us. This man lives on a green island, abundant with lush vegetation, in the heart of the sea. This island is marked by a rock, and it is located where the two seas meet. It is at this meeting point that Moses, according to the Quran, is to meet his mysterious teacher. Muslim commentators must be consulted in order to make sense of the enigmatic and fragmented story as told in the Quran. But in spite of its ambiguity, let me read the opening lines of the story as told in Surah 18. And Moses said to his page, I will not give up until I reach the meeting of the two seas, though I go on for many years. Then, when they reached their meeting, they forgot their fish, and it took its way into the sea, burrowing. When they had passed over, he said to his page, Bring us our breakfast. Indeed, we have encountered weariness from our journey. He said, What thinkest thou? When we took refuge in the rock, then I forgot the fish. And so it took its way into the sea in a manner marvelous. Said he, This is what we were seeking. And so they returned upon the tracks, retracing them. Then they found one of our servants, and to whom we had given mercy from us, and we had taught him knowledge proceeding from us. It appears that apart from the rock, there was yet another sign by which Moses and his servant would be able to recognize the place where the two seas meet. This sign was the miraculous revival of a cooked fish which Moses' servant had prepared for the breakfast. Although the Quran does not say it explicitly, it is evident that the miraculous way in which the cooked fish found its way into the sea is connected with a special quality of the water in this extraordinary place. It is the water of eternal life. Everything it touches becomes alive forever. Now this is yet another ancient motif. It is found, for instance, in legends about the great King Alexander, who had left such a deep impression on the peoples of the East in antiquity that for centuries, well into the Middle Ages, legends had been circulating about his almost superhuman personality and achievements. In several of these legends, the great Alexander, unsatisfied with all his conquests, in view of the temporary nature of everything that lives, Alexander goes in search for the spring of eternal life. And he goes with a companion, his servant, a cook named Andreas. After many days and years of unsuccessful search and wandering, they decide to part ways. On his way, Andreas sits by a spring in order to rest and take his meal. He opens the basket wherein he had stored a cooked fish. A few drops of water splash accidentally on the fish, and it is immediately revived and leaps into the water. Andreas jumps after the fish, and thus, inadvertently, he becomes blessed, or cursed, as it is sometimes implied, with immortality. In some of the Islamic versions of the Alexander legends, it is told that on diving into the water, which is the water of eternal life, Alexander's companion became green. Hence his name became known as Khidr, the green one. This name, or attribute rather than a proper name, has become later on slightly corrupted from Al-Khidr into Al-Khidr, which literally means the color green, or simply greenness. In some traditions, Khidr is described as living in the rivers and riding a fish, and therefore he is sometimes known also as Dhu Nun, Nun meaning fish, he who possesses the fish. His fish is his symbol. Khidr is also described as he who sits or walks on the skin of the earth, and from whose presence green shoots come forth. Wherever he stands or walks, things spring to life. He is endowed with the power of finding water, which is hidden in the depth of the earth. He can be present in many places at one and the same time. He materializes in many disguises and forms, and he is the one who appears in desperate situations to the constrained, al-muttar, and removes all obstacles. He is therefore the mushkil gusha of all times. Moses has been motivated to make the journey into the place where the two seas meet in order to find the teacher, the man who has been given direct knowledge from God. This place is the meeting point of the two planes of existence, where the sea of life and the sea of death meet, where the state of fana, annihilation, and the state of baqa, permanence, meet, where the plane of Moses, the group leader, and the plane of Khidr, the eternal teacher, meet. This place is marked by a rock, and by the miracle of resurrection, rebirth, transformation of cooked fish, of souls in the agony of the quest for the water of immortality. The rock is a symbol of God's mercy. It is a refuge, a stronghold, a place of rest for the weary travelers on the path. But there are many rocks along the seashore. How is this one to be recognized? By what special mark? There is no obvious demarcation line between the two zones, between the sea of life and the sea of death, between the two planes of existence. Even Moses, with all his eagerness and wisdom, and in spite of his special rank as the prophet to whom God had spoken, as the Bible tells us, mouth to mouth, even Moses did not recognize this meeting point when he had reached the place where the two seas meet. How much more so the ordinary seeker? But Moses does not give in to despair or self-blame. We are told that he and his page returned upon their tracks, retracing them. And this returning upon the tracks is the crucial point of transition, is the real experience of tawbah, the true repentance, the true conversion of the heart. The spiritual journey is in essence a tracing back, a regression from the point of view of ordinary life. In Moses retracing his tracks, there is a lesson for us to be learned, says Rumi. And these are Rumi's words. Learn from him with whom God spake, O noble listener. See what he who spoke with God says in his longing. Notwithstanding such a dignity and such a prophetic office, I am a seeker of Khidr. I am quit of self-regard. They said, O Moses, you have forsaken your people. You have wandered distraught in search of a blessed man. But you are an emperor, delivered from fear and hope. How long will you wander? How long will you seek? To what bound? He that is yours is with you, and you are conscious of this. O you who are exalted as the sky, how long will you traverse the earth? Moses said, Do not make this reproach against me. I will fare as far as the meeting place of the two seas, that afterwards I may be accompanied by the sovereign of the time. I will make Khidr a means to the achievement of my purpose. Either that, or I will go onward and journey by night a long while. I will fly with wings and pinions for years. What are years? For thousands of years. He said, I will fare, meaning, is it not worth that toilsome journey? Do not deem the passion of the beloved to be less than the passion for bread and worldly goods. So far, Rumi. Moses then is going in search of a teacher. And the teacher is there at the meeting point of the two seas, where past and future meet, where life and death meet, where light and darkness meet, where the two planes of existence meet in a way that can never be less than miraculous. The time-bound and the timeless, the space-bound and the spaceless, the transient and the eternal. The mystical journey is always a search for this meeting point where the two seas meet. This is one of the in-depth meaning of the union of opposites, the coincidentia oppositorum. It is a journey to an altogether different plane of existence from the one with which we are familiar. But at the same time, it is not a flight. It is not an escape from this familiar, mundane, earthly plane of existence. It is rather a meeting of the two. In order to reach this point, which is nowhere marked geographically or spatially, we too, like Gilgamesh millennia ago, must traverse the sea of death. This is the sea of illusion. When our consciousness is glued to the impressions and perceptions which relate to our physical existence, when we are totally immersed and identified with this way of perception to the exclusion of anything else, we are deemed dead. Gilgamesh, Alexander, and Moses have all embarked on this journey because they have come to realize that on this plane of existence everything is bound to perish. All three stand for some grandiose achievement. There was no mightier hero in ancient Mesopotamia than Gilgamesh. There was no mightier conqueror in antiquity than Alexander. There was no superior prophet in the biblical tradition than Moses. Yet all three, because they have reached the epitome of man's achievement in one way or another, all three must realize that all their achievements are only relative, that they are null and void in essence, and their duration is less than a mustard grain of measured time from the vantage point of eternal time. This is the essence of spiritual life. All that dwells upon the earth is perishing, yet still abides the face of thy Lord, majestic, splendid. Very famous verses from the Quran. All that dwells upon the earth is perishing, fanin, which gave the root from which the word fana comes from. Yet still abides the face of thy Lord. This is the baqa. Now this verse is the source for the pair of opposites which lies at the core of Sufi perception of reality, fana wa baqa, perishing and permanence. Sufis have often applied this pair of opposites to the highest stage on the path of inner transformation. Fana came to mean the perishing away of one's attachment and identification with a lower self or ego. And baqa came to mean the persistence, the permanence of the higher self, one's everlasting core of being in a timeless time. Fana, annihilation or death, is understood therefore in a positive, liberating way. This is not the liberation of an afterlife in the world to come. This is the liberation from the blurred, restricted vision of our ordinary sense perception, our ordinary values, our ordinary sense of right and wrong, good and evil. To traverse the sea of death is to go through a long and painful process in which all traces of self-centeredness fall away. in which all delusions fall away. This process culminates in the deep silence of merging with the beloved. Only when the nafs, the seat of our ego consciousness, dies, can our higher self abide with the beloved majestically, splendidly. Our three heroes, men of great achievements and of huge egos, become humbled when they realize that everything at the end perishes. Embarking on the journey is in itself a sign of a new attitude, an attitude of humility, poverty, and of longing for true fulfillment. Every spiritual journey can be traced down to this starting point, when the sense of lack, of inner poverty, of missing something tremendously essential takes over, and especially when it takes over after a life of powerful and grand achievements. Then a turning of the heart, a meaningful tauba occurs. One cannot have both hubris, the pride of the nafs, and the beloved. The former has to die so that the latter could abide, radiate, and flourish within the heart. The point of death for the nafs is the point of revival for the essence, for the higher self. At this point, Khidr is waiting. This is the meeting point of the sea of death and the sea of life. Khidr is therefore both the undertaker and the midwife. He shatters all our illusions and delusions, and then he gives meaning and direction to our soul's search. If we are genuinely seeking, if like Moses, Alexander, and Gilgamesh, we vow to follow the journey even if it takes eons, no matter what, then Khidr will teach us how to transform even the transformation, how to change the fluctuation of the heart from state to state into a permanent state of stability, immortality. Khidr lives on a green island by the source of the spring of immortality. He is the life force behind all natural phenomena. Nothing can be alive and vital without Khidr's touch or presence. Spiritually or emotionally, when we go through times of emptiness, depression, in an inner wilderness where nothing seems to grow, then we have seemingly lost touch with Khidr. Khidr has veiled himself, but he is always there, hiding behind the thorny, barren branches or in the empty water holes. When we sit together in an assembly of intimate friends, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of intimacy, or there does not seem to be a lot of meaningful transaction, when words sound empty and meaningless, when friends do not seem to truly address one another, Khidr is seemingly absent. He is in hiding. When things become mechanical, automatic, unconscious, then too Khidr is veiled. And if we have gathered here with a sense of purpose, if there has been something in our lives that has brought us together here, now. And if whatever is taking place in this here and now is meaningful and vital, this is the imprint of Khidr. When the eyes glimmer and shine, when Eros is in the air, then Khidr is around. But also when old idols are smashed, when I experience states of rage and frustration, when I am pissed off with my routine, my submissiveness to the vicissitudes of my circumstances, when I have reached a point of transition, a point of no return, when I am prepared to risk everything that I have taken for granted, then, provided the time is right, Khidr is at work. When my desperation and confusion have stripped me off of all expectations and perseverance, when I have become liberated of long time fears and inhibitions, because my despair has become deeper and greater than my fears, it is Khidr who intervenes and comes to my help as the remover of obstacles, as the Mushkil Gusha. It is he, this ancient, ever-present life force, who gives me strength to change the direction of my faltering life. Here are some lines from a poem inspired by a dream, which describes the complex inner relationship of the dreamer with Khidr. Once there was a man, a green man, ancient man. He lived before time was. He weaved creation out of the green, the evergreen green plains of his interiors. I lost him. Transformation of the color green to light and vice versa ceased. There was no hope. The future stopped becoming. I lost my man of green. I lost my man of light. I dreamed. I dreamed a circle. I dreamed myself a circle. And there was me, and him, and many men like him, men and women of green, all weaving threads of golden rays of green to be my daughter's hair, my red-haired, blue-eyed daughter, so young that she can hardly know her name, so tender she can hardly speak the sounds which have formed her, the primal notes of her in my becoming. When the mysterious way in which we are connected inwardly to Khidr reveals itself to us in a dream or an insight or in a vision, in a landscape, in a piece of poetry, in an art form, in craft, or in relationships, then the deep meaning of this evergreen life force in us becomes plain, evident, and overwhelming. It is then that obstacles which had blocked our process of transformation are miraculously removed. In our tradition, the link with Khidr comes many a time through dreams. Khidr dreams come from the deepest, most ancient recesses of the soul. Khidr in dreams is a sign of a great shift, a tremendous inner movement in the psyche. Here is a dream which was dreamed exactly a year ago. in London by a woman who only occasionally could come to see the teacher. She dreamed, and I quote verbatim, "I go to a funeral. I'm just arriving, and my mother is there, taking off her dripping wet silver grey coat. I take off my own coat and realize that I'm wearing the same silver grey coat, as dripping wet as my mother's. There are many coats hanging on coat stands, but I do not see anyone else." Then the scene changes. A few of us are sitting on the floor. We call for Khidr. It is like a ceremony. He appears without shape, and I tell him to materialize. Suddenly, I am pulled into the center as if on a skateboard, and he grows out of myself. I cannot watch myself, as sometimes in other dreams, and I feel possessed. The only thing I can see of Khidr is a green, golden light. What remains of myself is the old potato when you dig out the new ones. I try to concentrate that I am not in the way of this happening, and it feels like trying to hold an automatic umbrella together with both hands. Then I wake up with a terrible fear. The wind outside is strong and roaring, and I try to calm down, which is difficult and takes time. I feel hot, like an immersion heater. The wind outside is strong and roaring. What a tremendous energy is the energy of transformation. In the brief moment of a dream, one dies like an old potato, and one is reborn anew. A funeral is about to take place in the opening scene of the dream. The dreamer and her mother are the only persons there, but there are many coats hanging on coat stands, as though there were many invisible participants in the funeral. Many indeed. The multitude of connections, relationships, conditioning and patterns which have shaped the lives of the mother and daughter. They have gathered there with them to witness the death and burial of the primordial bond between mother and daughter. This bond, which is so essential for us when we are small, when we are children, becomes too narrow, too constricting, too limiting, too suffocating when we grow up, for both. The relationship with the mother is the most subtle, the most obstinate and long-lasting of all our relationships. Thus, before the great dynamic transformation heralded by Khidr can take place, the dreamer has to grow out of this close Ouroboros relationship with her mother. In the dream, both mother and daughter wear the same silver grey coat. They both take their coats off. The coats are dripping wet. It is raining. Rain is grace. Rain is the touch of Khidr. Rain is Khidr. Rain is the water of compassion, which is there at every new creation. The funeral is the ritual which both mother and daughter have to go through in order for both of them to mature, to be born anew. The funeral symbolizes the crossing of the sea of death. Then another ritual takes place in the inner chambers. a group of people, companions on the path, are sitting in meditation, doing a very particular dhikr. They invoke Khidr. Since this is not a practice in which the group normally engages, it symbolizes something deeply unique to the dreamer. It is her own mode of dhikr. The group invokes him, and Khidr comes. He is shapeless, formless, as is the teaching, as are all teachers from all eternity. The teacher does not have a name. He does not have a face. Khidr is not a name. Mushkil Gusha is not a name. It's an attribute, a description. The teacher does not have a name. He does not have a face. Only a golden green light. This light is the light of eternal life, the light of Baqa. After the blackness of Fana, the golden green light of Baqa. The dream preserves the sense of antiquity, of mystery, of the other worldliness which is at the other side of the meeting point of the two seas. Now the dreamer is a sincere seeker. The intensity of her quest energy is outstanding, and yet in her dream she is pulled to the center as if on a skateboard. She is gliding effortlessly. After the effort, after the practice of invocation, she is moved effortlessly into the center of her being, and there, out of herself, Khidr materializes. We are searching for a teacher out there, but the outer teacher always points to the inner teacher. Often we find it hard to believe, simply because we are so short-sighted. We can only see from the level of our familiar selves, the level of our egos, the level of our three-dimensional minds, just so incapacitated. The inner teacher resides within us in this other realm, that which lies on the other side of the sea of phenomena. To get such a powerful dream experience equals probably many, many years of outer tribulations. But the dream does not promise a tranquil, harmonious outer life. What the dreamer had encountered in the dream will have to be lived out in the unfolding patterns of her new life, which will be chosen for her now by her inner Khidr and not by her outer circumstances. She will have to live up to her experience. Khidr symbolizes the realm of endless possibilities, opportunities, potentialities that we don't know we have within us. The meeting of the two seas means also this, that through us, the realm of potentialities, myths and archetypes comes to life. Out of the field in which old dead potatoes are the sole reminders of the past, a new crop will yield. This dream, as many other dreams that we have, are initiated by the grace and power of the teacher. And this is yet another way in which Khidr reveals itself to us. The water of life which flows from the source of all being becomes manifested concretely, tangibly in the teacher, in our living teacher. See, there's kind of a paradox. We say that teacher is inside, but the teacher also has to materialize for us outside ourselves. both. If Khidr is the archetypal life force behind our spiritual journey, then our contemporary living teacher is the earthly manifestation of this life force. Without a link with a teacher, a real transformation may not be easy to come about. Or if it does come about, it might dwindle after a while. Once one becomes connected to a living teacher, life cannot continue in its former roots. Things start changing. Everyone who has been seriously interested in spiritual life knows this from their own experience. Yet most of our difficulties on the path arise because, although we want to change, we do not really want to give up anything. The teacher, therefore, like Khidr, has a twofold aspect. He comes across as a benefactor, as a merciful, nourishing person, but he can also appear as a ruthless, uncompromising uprooter of habits and patterns. First, he seduces, then executes, then revives. Again and again on the journey, which is a never-ending story, we have to go back to the point where the two seas meet, where life and death converge. The contact with a teacher, according to the mystical tradition, warrants against falling back into the sleep of unconsciousness and mechanical existence. The teacher, like Khidr, is both the reviver of dead souls as also the destroyer of illusions. He is the executioner and the reviver at one and the same time. Tweedy used to call Baisab beloved executioner. Because like Khidr, the teacher stands at the meeting point of the opposites. This meeting point, as we have seen, belongs to a new dimension of being, which can only be perceived once we have become liberated from the trap of our ego consciousness, of our three-dimensional perception. Now the teacher, like a finely tuned compass, always points to the mystical north. North has always symbolized death. There is something ominous, almost sinister, about the esoteric north, not unlike the ominousness of a black hole. It takes in everything. But this ominous aspect emanates from our limited, three-dimensional perception. Viewed from the dimension of the teacher, of Khidr, this black hole can be a pathway to a higher level of consciousness, a door to the beyond. This is one of the implications of the mystical north, where the sun never rises. The teacher then points to a direction which is both ominous and auspicious, both frightening and exciting. In states of deep meditation, we may sometimes experience this concurrence of a chilling awe coupled with the sweetness of intimacy. We are terrified of letting go, and therefore sometimes we are scared stiff of the teacher. And at the same time, we are attracted helplessly, hopelessly, like Ulysses' sailors, beyond and against our will. We are attracted to become annihilated through the killing grace of the teacher. This goes to show that in our quest, what we are really up against is a poker game in which we gamble everything away and we are scared stiff. The deeper we penetrate into the story of Moses and Khidr, the more awesome it becomes. This unnamed man, the green one, who carries the everlasting grace of God, behaves in the most bizarre, most obnoxious way. Once the encounter takes place, once Moses finds his teacher, he is in for a big surprise. Because everything Khidr does is against the deepest convictions, the deepest sense of morality which Moses carries. Where does Moses come from? From the highest values of human morality and ethics. And the teacher robs Moses of these values. The teacher points out to Moses that his understanding of the value of justice and mercy are based on human short-sightedness and of a mistaken interpretation of situations. Khidr acts out 3 times in a way that leaves Moses and all sincere and good-hearted listeners in a state of shock. First, he drills a hole in a boat of some poor fishermen, and they cannot go out to sea to catch the daily catch. Then he comes to a place where he and Moses are graciously invited into some people's house, and the next morning he kills the young son, the only son. Thirdly, he comes to a place where people are nasty to both of him and Moses, but he helps them build a wall. At all these points, Moses cannot contain himself. He protests and demands an explanation. But this is contrary to the deal which he had made with Khidr. When Moses, after his long journey of quest, finally met Khidr at this meeting point of the 2 seas, he asked Khidr permission to follow him wherever he went. Khidr agreed, but on one condition, that Moses must not ask any question and must not demand any explanations. And Moses accepts this condition. But in the face of the teacher's acts, he cannot keep quiet. How many times did Mrs. Tweedy protest against Bicep's unjustified behavior with her? How many times something in us protests against things we witness which go against the grain of our concepts and values? The teacher will tell the disciple, at times quite literally, that day is night and night is day, will deliberately create situations of confusion and misunderstandings, to say the least. So, we must not take Khidr's story on its mythical, legendary level only. The meeting with the teacher is about a process of total emptying, and total is total, with no reservations. Everything has to go, Bicep said to Tweedy. He took away even her belief in karma, which was the last belief that she hung on to for a long, long time. This is a most difficult test of endurance, and it is also a most crucial test of discretion. It's easy enough to say that teacher will create confusion. But how does one have the discretion to know that the one who is doing that is the real teacher? Tweedy used to say that at the beginning the disciple has the right to test the teacher. What does it mean? How can the disciple at the beginning of his journey, when he is losing all sense of discrimination based upon his former values, and when he has not yet acquired the teacher's values, how can he possibly make a judgment? A big paradox. But the disciple knows. Something in the disciple knows, not the rational mind. This becomes more and more useless, but something else. Once the heart knows, this is it. This is my meeting of the two seas. This is my piece of cake, as Judy used to say. This is coming home. Then the teacher takes over and the real tests begin for the disciple. But first the disciple has the right to test the teacher. One of the long-lasting tests is that things with a teacher are never what the disciple expects. So Moses, the giver of divine law, has to watch Khidr commit the most atrocious acts without being allowed to ask for explanation. He must learn to acquire a new eyesight. He must learn to see things from a new perception, from a new dimension, from the realm of intuition. Because Khidr's acts only seem arbitrary and mean, behind all of them lies a deeper vision of all three situations which they have encountered. He sees things from a higher point of view. He can see further to the distance. Now, at the meeting points of the opposites, at life and death situations, at these situations of tremendous confusion, the teacher is present and waiting. And at the level of a real meeting with a teacher, the discrimination between the opposites falls away. Life and death do not stand apart anymore. This is also an illusion. One implication of this is that there is no such thing as dead teachers. The lineage of teachers long deceased is always alive and functioning. And the Sufi tradition is full of anecdotes relating how meetings between past and present generations are possible, and people know it. The link which makes this communication possible is Khidr. Has to be a link. The Naqshbandiya in particular have become known for the fact that the teaching has been passed on to disciples of one generation through teachers who were alive in previous generations. Sometimes hundreds of years divide between teacher and disciple. That this is at all conceivable is the hallmark of Khidr. In the image of Khidr, all teachers become one. In the image of Khidr, the teacher and the teaching become one, and they all become immortal, because he sits at the spring of immortal life. And the Sufi tradition has also distinguished a very special group of seekers. Those seekers whose soul link with the teaching is through Khidr. They have no teacher in the flesh. Their teacher, as in Moses' case, is Khidr, direct. And they have been given by the tradition a special name, the Uwaisiyun. And they are named after Uwais, a contemporary of the Prophet Muhammad, who lived in Yemen and could never make the journey to Medina in order to join the followers of Muhammad due to his mother's illness. So it's very interesting. First, this bond with the mother has to be fulfilled, has to be worked through. And yet, it has been accepted that this Uwais had a special and direct link with Muhammad. The Prophet said that their spirits had been at all times together. Now the same principle of meeting in the spirit applies to those masters whose special link has been with Khidr. And I'll end with two anecdotes relating to two such masters. In the biography of one of the greatest masters of 11th century Khurasan, Abu Sa'id ibn Abil Khair, it is told that in his youth he committed himself to a very austere and ascetic way of life. For days he would wander alone in harsh and lonely places. His father, who was concerned about him, would go after him and bring him back. And the sheikh, in order to please his father, would come home. But after he had stayed a few days, he could no longer bear men's company. Once again he would run away and go back to the mountains and the deserts. Sometimes the people of Mena, his hometown, caught sight of him wandering in those remote areas. They saw him in the company of an awesome old man dressed in white. Later in life, when our sheikh had attained his high mystic rank, people asked him, "Oh sheikh, those days we saw you. Who was the awe-inspiring old man you were with?" Our sheikh replied, "That was Khidr, peace be upon him." And in his lives of Muslim saints and mystics, Fariduddin Attar of the 13th century tells us how Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi had been trained by Khidr. Tirmidhi wished to join some friends of his who went on a journey in quest of knowledge. But his mother fell ill, and since she was a widow, she pleaded with him to stay with her. He did, but was very distressed. He spent long hours alone in the cemetery, weeping. Then a luminous old man dressed in white appeared in front of him one day and said, "Would you like me to teach you a lesson daily?" "I would," Tirmidhi answered. So every day the old man taught Tirmidhi a lesson, till 3 years had gone by. Then he realized that the man was Khidr, and that he had attained this felicity because he fulfilled his mother's wish. And the following mysterious story, according to Attar, was reported by Abu Bakr al-Waraq, Tirmidhi's closest disciple. Every Sunday, Khidr would visit Tirmidhi, and they would converse on every matter. One day, Tirmidhi handed over to Abu Bakr many volumes of his writings to cast into the river Oxus. The latter examined them and found them replete with mystic subtleties and truths. He could not bring himself to carry out his master's instructions, and instead stored them in his room. When he returned, Tirmidhi asked him, "What did you see?" "Nothing," Abu Bakr replied. "You did not throw them in," Tirmidhi concluded. "Go and do so." He went back and threw the books into the Oxus. Then he saw the river open up, and an open chest appeared. The volumes fell into it. Then the lid closed and the river subsided. Abu Bakr was astonished. "Did you throw them in this time?" Tirmidhi asked when he returned. "Master, by God's glory," Abu Bakr cried, "tell me the secret behind this." "I had composed something on the mystical knowledge, the disclosing of which was difficult for human minds to grasp," he replied. "My brother Khidr entreated me. The chest was brought by a fish at his bidding, and Almighty God commanded the water to convey it to him. Khidr is very versatile. It comes in many forms, in many ways, in different names. I'm sure you had experiences, dreams, things that sort of maybe now you say, aha, maybe this was Khidr. Or maybe in some other ways you can connect dreams and experiences that you had to the pieces of tradition that they try to bring together.
I always remember this Khidr dream which somebody told me in Switzerland, and she knew nothing of Sufism really, and she just came to this workshop because of this dream she'd had, and in the dream she was invited into a circle of white-clad figures who were chanting Al Khidr, Al Khidr, Al Khidr. And she said, what is it? She'd never heard of it before.
But yes, what is this with the Swiss people who have Al Khidr?
Yeah. That's amazing.
Because this dream that I read was also by a Swiss woman. That's true. Yes, very strange. Yeah. I don't think any Sufi group practices invoking Khidr. This is not a practice that anybody is engaged with, because he's not God. He's not. But he's between.
Mediator.
He's a mediator. He's a force. It's so ancient. And I gave this, the evening I gave this talk in London, it wasn't exactly this talk, but it was the same, more or less. And a woman came for the first time to join these talks, and she was an African woman, but a Muslim woman. Very nice. And then later on she also came to the meditation. Her name is Rahmat, which means compassion, like Rahma. But when she came, she didn't know exactly where to go, and she asked. Afterwards it was told in the hall. She asked Geraldine, "Which way should I go?" And Geraldine said, "Through the green door," because there was a green door leading to the hall. So in the toilet it was. No, she had a dream that she shared that evening, and it was very, very good, because the dream brought together her African tradition with a Muslim tradition and with the meditation that we were doing. So it was very interesting. She was sharing a dream.
Very interesting when you said that nobody practiced an invocation, because when you speak about how you spoke, it's like when you say Khidr is not God, but he is, and maybe it's the is. It's one contact, and then it's a state of being.
I'm sure that like this woman who had a dream, it was her mode of dhikr, it was her mode of meditation. I'm sure that on a personal, on an individual level, we are called to make the connection. I think we are called to make the connection. But as a practice, as a collective practice, I don't know that any Sufi group has used it. Maybe, but on an individual level, I think it's so important. I mean, it's important for me. It's this, and then invoking or praying to or asking or like the Mushkil Gusha, what is this? What is that thing? We can't see anymore. We don't know. I mean, it's all foggy or like the dream you had the other day, Betsy, when your eyes were all sticky and you couldn't see, and then something happened. So this was almost this woman who had to go back to do something, to tell you something. We need help. I mean that's the thing. It's again a kind of paradox, because we have to do the work alone. The process is so individual. We can't even take recipes from anybody. It's not like making a cake. What works for one doesn't work for the other. But at the same time, we are totally useless on our own. So where do we get this help from? I think these connections are so essential, so timeless. I was saying to Diana just now, and also yesterday we spoke, Andrea and I, and it's something that kind of it draws in my mind. We were listening. We drove together, Andrea and I, and she had Marion Woodman cassette. And I can't say that we listened very attentively to the whole thing, but there were 20 minutes that we listened to, and I was very impressed. I'd never heard Marion Woodman before, and I was very impressed because not necessarily because of what she said, not necessarily because of what she said, but because of the inspiration. I mean, there was an inspired woman there, and that's actually all there needs to be, just somebody inspiring or inspired to inspire others. And then I thought to myself, she was saying these things to the people, and she was telling how much of our culture is addiction. We are an addicted culture. Whatever we do is a kind of addiction in order to run away from pain. We can't look at our pains. We can't look at our longings. And it was very spiritual in a way. Then I was thinking to myself, well, now let's say that all these people, or maybe even 20% of these people, get inspired and say, well, yes, we're going to change our life, we're going to do something, we're going to look into our pain. But then what? Then what? I mean, I don't know. I asked Andrea, I asked Diane, I'm asking myself, I'm saying this because my feeling is that what sustains us, what really gives us the nourishment and the ability to proceed is that we are connected. That we are connected to a lineage, we are connected to a tradition. And we say the word tradition, it's almost obscene, because we may think of fundamental religions or I don't know, traditions. But no, this is sacred. This is really something beyond time. We are not Muslims. It doesn't matter at all. But the connection has to be there. The validation of our experiences, the validation of the teacher. Who is this man or this woman who come and talk to us? By what is the credit? I don't know. That's for me. This the Khidr as a, if you wish, a symbol. It's not the symbol. It's not even an archetype. It's a real living force. But as a symbol of the continuity of the tradition, of the way things pass from one generation to the other, to the way it's all linked. There's no abruptness in the way things unfold in the real spiritual journey. So we are not alone. So we are and we are not. See, if we were really, really totally alone, we couldn't do a thing. I mean, the whole thing about from the alone to the alone would be a joke. It would not be what? And so this link is more than important. It's essential. And at the same time, what's interesting is that because there is this ambiguity about Khidr. I mean, now what is he? Is he the teacher, or is he the teacher, the archetype of the teacher? What is he? Because of this ambiguity, you'll find quite a lot of traditions within the Sufi literature which deny Khidr. Like, not deny Khidr, but, for instance, there is a tradition about someone who was running to see the teacher, his own teacher. And there was Khidr on a horse, and Khidr was saying to him, "Come with me." He said, "Go away, I don't have time for you, I'm going to my teacher." It's interesting. It's interesting because somewhere we need the link with the living teacher before we can really move on. And there is a little one of the little poems in the Conference of the Birds, very much at the beginning, when some of the birds describe their obstacles. Why? What hinders them from going on the journey? And they come forward, and for instance, the nightingale says, "I know everything about love because I'm in love with a rose. So what is this Simurg that you're saying? This, is far away, and I don't know if I reach him. And I have the rose, and the rose will die without my love. So I have to stay with the rose." And the duck comes and says things, and the parrot came, and the parrot says, "I don't need the Simurg because I have Khidr. I'm green like Khidr." And the Hupu, the leader, says to him, "You know nothing, because the real journey is about death, and Khidr is about life." So, I mean, it's not to be hooked with one thing, like in the dream interpretation. Wonderful, the rainbow, I mean, it's like telling us, don't get hooked on this fixed interpretation. It's very ambiguous, it's very versatile. It's this and it's not that. And if you are in a state that the link is with a real teacher, stay with this. Khidr is always there. And if for you, I mean, and that's why everything is accommodated, because there are these people, very rare in numbers at least, that don't have a link in the flesh, and still they make it. They make it, like Tirmidhi. Was one of the greatest, and he didn't have a teacher. But he had Khidr. So we never know really, but at the same time it's the same principle of tremendous nourishment, of tremendous richness. We become poor in order to find these treasures. Like, don't hang on to this curtain, because my God, I mean, what is this curtain compared with the treasures of the tradition? So rich somewhere. They say, I mean, there is something about colors in the tradition, and again, I mean, the when we go into the nothingness, it's black. And there are very powerful traditions about the color black. Very powerful, I mean, amazingly powerful, about Sufis who have, it's not just like we use it as a symbol, really experienced something. And they talk about colors generally, not about the black only, but they talk about the colors as states, as inner states. And one can have an experience of a color that one will die of longing to that color. And when we had this talk in not this talk, but another one about colors, about the color of water, people came with experiences of colors that were amazing, like how you can die of longing for color. And Joan told about a dream that she had, in which I think it was a ring that she was given, and it was blue. And she said it was such a blue, and for a long, long time she was searching everywhere, in reality, to find that kind of blue, but she couldn't. It cannot be. That there are colors in the beyond which are unbelievable, and the heart just melts from longing. But the color, the color of meditation, the color of fana, of annihilation, of merging is black. Then they say that after the blackness there is this golden green light, which is the light of immortality, in a spiritual sense. So when she had, to have such a dream where she goes to a funeral, which is the blackness, which is the death, and then nothing, she doesn't see anything but this golden green light. That's something. And we get these dreams, isn't it something? And I don't think, this woman, unlike the woman that Llewellyn told, she knew something about Khidr, but not much. She hasn't really delved into it. And she produced this dream.
And does it come from before Islam, the story that's told in the Quran?
Oh yes.
That's just the story. That's just a repetition in the Quran of an old traditional story.
These were stories that have been told in the East for millennia. I just brought just three threads: the thread of Gilgamesh and the thread of Alexander. You were somewhere. That's my lot. I make this effort and then you go to sleep. But yes, they and the fish, very ancient, and this is why the Quran is quite fascinating actually, because the stories in the Quran are told in such a way that only an audience who had heard the story, who had known the story, could understand, could make sense of it. To read just the verses as they are, without the whole commentary that scholars use or traditional Muslims use, one cannot understand it. But the audience to whom these verses were, in front of whom these verses were spoken, they knew, because they were very well-known stories, very ancient.
And is it significant that he's not mentioned by name in the Quran?
Very significant. This is one thing that I feel quite strongly about. That because since we don't have a kind of direct link with the Arabic language, we interpret in our minds Khidr as a proper name. Like I'm Sarah, he's Khidr, hello. But it's not a name. Like the Mushkil Gusha, it's not a name. And it's important because he and this is in the Quran. Khidr energy. In the Quran, he is not. The word Khidr is not mentioned. It's only in the commentaries. In the Quran, he's just one of our servants unto whom we had bestowed knowledge of us. Knowledge of us, and it really, this term in Arabic really resonates. And it al-ilm al-laduni. Laduni means that belongs to us. It doesn't have even a meaning. You cannot substitute anything. It's not the ilm. It's not the knowledge of, healing. It's not the knowledge of dream interpretation. It's a term which is ambiguous.
So it's belonging as much as
belonging to us, and us is God. And what has become very strong in the Sufi tradition is to take this figure Khidr as the symbol, as the archetype of teachers. I've said it in the talk, but in a very particular way. This is again something that maybe we have to make a little mental effort to understand the psyche, the Muslim psyche, or the Sufis when they were acting within the Muslim framework. Because in the Muslim belief, the last of the prophets was Muhammad. And there's no more prophecy. I mean, the whole thing of God talking through people finished, according to Muslim theology. And then, from the very beginning, there were these men and women who were not called prophets, but were called awliya, friends of God, wali. So, who were they? What was their way of communication with God? So they had to develop a whole category, a whole department of holy men who had direct communication with God. And the basis for this was this chapter, are these verses. Because it was Khidr who had the knowledge which belonged to God, and not Moses. So if Moses stands on the line of prophets, it was those holy men who, from their intuition, from a direct link with God, had these revelations. And so the juxtaposition to put together prophets and friends of God is tremendously powerful in this tradition. We are a little bit detached from it, especially.
So Khidr is a friend of God.
Yes. And
that's the
he's not a prophet.
Could it be the reason that he doesn't take a name that, to the extent that we personify Khidr and live it, Khidr becomes our name? He sends out, he's every name and no name.
That's it. Exactly. By whichever name we call him. That's our inner life force. And that's it is really like this because he, what does it mean that he sits at the mouth of rivers? And what does it mean that he is at the source of the life of the water of immortality? It's the possibilities, the potentialities. I mean, we have so much in us that we haven't even tapped a very small percentage of what we have in us. And just to get in touch with this, I think is so reviving, or can be such a reviver for dead souls, you know, and just to know when we are well, nothing much happens in our life, and we can't see how we're getting out of this. Not even a black tunnel, but just grayness. He's there. I mean, he is there. Has to be. It's like but he was also very cunning, you know, very tricksterish. I mean, nature also has its shadow. Khidr also has its shadow. Can bite. And this weaving together to make creation, to weave this. That's our potentialities, our inner potentialities. And again, this dream really that the woman had. She tells him to materialize. Khidr comes and he has no shape, and she tells him to materialize. She makes a connection with him, and then he does, and he comes through her.